Hey everybody, it's Friday, April the 12th, 2024, and this is How to Restart a Church, a spin-off podcast where I, Pastor Trey Comstock, and my dear friend and colleague, now in her new studio, Pastor Emily Larson, talk about how to make church happen, how to make church happen again. Last week, we did social media and the attention economy, and this week, we are picking up, I'm not sure we set out to do 2 weeks in a row of my my former podcasting life as at-home text journalist, but we're going to talk about AI, and specifically AI in sermon writing. So there is floating out in the media landscape a lot of media executives like Jim Spenfeller of Geo Media. This has happened to Sports Illustrated. This is one of the things that's happening in the media landscape is writers, professional writers, getting replaced with artificial intelligence. In the past few months, Sports Illustrated got busted for running an AI article under the byline of a made-up human. Like, they just, made up a human, and actually all of that content was generated by artificial intelligence. And so, there's this whole argument in the media, content creation world about the ways that particularly professional writers and professional artists are being replaced with artificial intelligence, being replaced with ChatGPT-4, being replaced with these what are called, define some terms. So what we talk about with AI and writing is AI is like a buzzword that makes you think of science fiction. What they are actually called are LLMs, or large language models. And so these are basically a really complex algorithm has been trained on the internet and human literature and a whole bunch of human writing with a lot of copyright concerns that I am not, and this show is not equipped to talk about, but a lot of these kinds of concerns, because not everyone consented to have their data be in the pool that trained ChatGPT-4. Google it used to be called Bard. It's now called something else. Right. Microsoft has Copilot. Microsoft works with the folks at OpenAI who makes ChatGPT. So anyways, but for us, this is where our lives intersect with the lives of broader content creators, because we are also people who have to write things on a really regular basis. We call them things like sermons and Bible studies and seminary essays and these things, right? And we tend to, if maybe lagging a little, tend to reflect what happens in the broader media landscape. When television got easy to do, we all, Christian broadcasting blows up. When now we're all podcasting. Here we are podcasting, right? We all do. So for a while anyways, we made our bishop did this. Some friends of ours did this. Just kind of joke around and what would ChatGPT come up with? Isn't this so funny? And that's not what I'm worried about. The kind of funny meme uses of ChatGPT, make ChatGPT write a silly poem, say this was written by ChatGPT. Isn't this interesting? Isn't this weird? That's fine. That's just something.
That's
in the
just the
artistic
world
palette.
we live in now, right? That's a way to use a tool, right?
And I'm not even talking about letting ChatGPT, if you think it's gotten good enough, to help you with your research, right? What should I know about this thing I'm talking about, this scripture I'm talking about, this theologian I'm talking about? That research process can be really painful, and the kinds of things that, what I have is I've built my own algorithms. I know where my books are. I know where my seminary notes are. I've loaded enough into my own large language model, my brain, but that's because I've been an every Sunday preacher for more than 10 years now. So I'm not even talking about that. What I am zeroing in on is the idea that ChatGPT is writing things that then you present as your sermon.
Right. As your original theology.
Yeah.
Which is different than just, hey, I found this joke online that another preacher told, and I'm going to insert that into my sermon to, make a point or whatever, right? Like there's whole websites, sermoncentral.com and sermonillustrations.com. And
I'm
people
not
upload their sermons for just as another resource for research, right? That's different than presenting a sermon written by AI completely.
Right. And there are plenty of other types of media where folks who are interested in the time and money something takes versus the quality and personality of something are doing that, right? I mentioned specifically GeoMedia, and which owns things like Kotaku, a bunch of like gaming and tech websites that I follow. Sports Illustrated is rapidly becoming a shell of itself because a lot of folks are going, look, we can just make these large language models churn out something and people will read the thing and they'll click the thing and we'll make the money. And, but actually what builds a brand, a readership, a congregation, right? If we want to get at how does this relate to how to restart a church? And the how to restart a church answer is like, don't do this. Not even because I want to make some ethical argument about copyright, although that's because this is just not this show.
That's certainly a conversation to be had, but not this show. Yeah.
I'm a pastor, not a copyright lawyer. I don't pretend to understand it other than that seems real bad to me. But why is it flashing green?
I don't have flashing green.
Anyways, it's probably nothing. Or it's probably off. Yeah, no, although it's still counting up.
Yeah, Weird. It's still 7:30.
Okay.
All right.
Who knows? So the how to restart a church side of this is not just maybe AI bad. I'm not worried about AI apocalypses. Robert Evans at the Behind the Bastards podcast, which I listen to, has this whole wonderful argument that AI itself is becoming a religion for the people that are really pushing it, that they write about it in these like these soteriological, these like end, but like the like positive like return of like AI to them is like, oh, human lifespans are going to be expanded. We can live 1,000 years because of the medical advances of AI, and it's all going to be so wonderful. And anything that holds back the this is from Mark Andreessen of Andreessen Horowitz, is one of the big venture capitalists that funds all of Silicon Valley, but now they're funding AI. He put out this statement that it was like, anything that holds back AI is killing people. That anything, regulation and not giving access to data sets, this is going to kill people because of the just truly wonderful opportunities of AI, right? So Mark Evans makes the argument that it's a religion, and it's not a bad argument. It is certainly being talked about in saint-like terms of just the amazing things
of what AI is going to be capable of. And that makes me wonder. So I wonder if, generations from now, AI will be so commonplace that we will be having the conversation of, does AI have a soul? Does AI whatever?
Well, this is a lot of science fiction and speculative fiction get at that, right?
Right.
Like you think of the character of Data in Star Trek, the Next Generation. Human consciousness, right? Like, and Data gets a cat, and like Data is amazing. Obviously, Data is played by a human, but he's pitched as he is an AI being. He is an android. Right. And what does it mean to have this android that then starts to really, as they do a lot with that character, right? What this is about, or where I'm going with all of this, other than AI buzzwords, right. Is if we're using it for preaching, I think we're missing the point of what people are longing for from us in this moment. And if one of the things that landed us here is a lack of feeling human and a lack of personality and a lack of an ability to connect with real human life, then handing our writing task over to an artificial intelligence who is literally not, at least at this point, not human, seems like, yeah, you'll get the content done faster. And Lord knows, like, I spend so much of my week writing the essay that drives the other show, writing my sermon, writing a Bible study, between just writing, right? Like, let's leave the talking into microphones part of it.
Content creation is the majority of our work.
Yeah, I mean, I spend like 50% of my week writing. My whole life is built around sermon writing. When I don't do it, it feels weird because it's just like so the rhythm of my brain. So even like when I'm not like sitting in my office reading or writing or what I call Don Drapering, which is just staring off moodily into space, which is what I like, Mad Men really validated my artistic process. I don't drink heavily while I'm writing, but I do stare at my office wall moodily a lot. And seeing Don Draper do that really made me feel, oh, okay, I'm not alone. This is, and like there are days, like last week I finished my writing at like 9:40 p.m. on a Thursday night, which is my Friday. And the writer's block sucks. And there are days where it happens where I would understand the temptation to hand my writing over to an AI, to just type in thoughts on John 20, 19 through 31. Go, chat, make it funny. Or even, you could even train a large language model on yourself, right? So feed it enough of your writing so you can theoretically tell ChatGPT, write a 1,000-word essay on John 20, 19 through 31 in the style of Trey Comstock. And you train it on, and so it would even
on your YouTube videos and your uploaded previous sermons and your writings and you can input all that data.
Right. And so I could even make it theoretically like maybe sound like me. Games journalist I follow, a guy named Jeff Gersman, did this. His writing's been so out there on the internet. He's been a games journalist since the mid-90s. And so his writing is just out there. And so I think this was ChatGPT 3. But one of I think this was before 4, but it was like, write a game review of fill in the blank video game in the style of Jeff Gersman. And what he came back with was like, it definitely used turns of phrases that I would use. The review itself didn't make any sense because how can a robot do a review in the same way that how can a robot do a sermon? But like I can even make it sound like me, but that misses the point.
That's the language learning part, right? That's the LLM. That's the language. They've learned your language. They know your turn of phrase. They know what speech patterns you would use. That's all that is, right? So how then I see the potential for like dangerous theology coming from.
Right. Well, that's part of it, right?
An AI-generated sermon as well. And that's even different than because you and I have been have had colleagues and people that we know of who don't just use ChatGPT or AI, but they will use someone else's work, ghostwriting, right? Or not even ghostwriting,
or literally just downloading Stephen Furtick's sermons and presenting them as their own.
Right. But then even that became so dangerous because the congregation knows. They're like, why would I listen to this person say it when I could listen to, Stephen Furtick say it or whatever? But there's, I'm sure megachurch pastors also get help from their writing teams or whatever it is. They have ghostwriters because they're churning out so much content and books and whatever else per week that there's no human way possible to do that and then still get up there and deliver the sermon.
But I think there's gradations here, right? Mm-hmm. Because I think what I think makes a good sermon and what I sense the world wants from us that we have not always given them is something that feels deeply personal, that feels deeply connected to their lives, and how can an AI know what's going on in your particular congregation in this particular moment, right? That we don't write sermons that are generic, we write sermons that are specific to the people that we are engaging with, that sermons are born out of relationships.
Yes.
Dr. Stevens at Emory, one of the preaching professors I took, talked about, like, you want to do prophetic preaching, you want to do preaching that shifts people's perception of right and wrong. The best people he saw do that were not the people who just showed up and shouted, but that like built relationships with the congregation. And over time, the pastoral care combined with the preaching or sermon as like also integrated into the pastoral care, like the whole curriculum of a congregation, then moving people. And so it is so born out of personality and relationship and feeling like a real human and taking ourselves off of a pedestal, and but then also like make it relevant to your people, right? Like, ChatGPT is not going to know the points of reference of all of the people. And theoretically, I know that way better because I've done that work. Now, if you haven't done the get to know your folks work, you also need to do the get to know your folks work. And so like a ghostwriter that is at least, or a team of writers, a writer's room that is at least embedded in a congregation, even if that congregation is huge, maybe we should credit those ghostwriters or credit that writing room in the same way that comedy writers do, right? Like John Oliver, like in the credits, lists the writers. And so it's just like, credit the people who did the work. I have less of an issue with that. That's just church at a scale I can't comprehend.
And that's very similar to what we did as a pastoral team when we were working with several people going to 6 different churches, different campuses. We would collaborate, right? We would get together with the scripture. We would start with a sermon idea, and then we would all take it our own different ways and make it personal to our congregations. But that was a writer's room, right?
But I was ghostwriting the series for all of y'all. Ghostwriting, like we all kind of knew it, right?
Yes.
But like I was largely writing the series, and then we would collaborate on and talk through. We actually built a whole podcast around talking through our different thoughts on these scriptures, and we externalized
imagery, all of it, right? But and that's that was just a writer's room, but we still created our own content in the end, right? Like our sermons were still our own and were relevant to specifically the congregations that we would then go and preach to. I think that has a lot to do with it for sure. But I mean, Jesus did this, right? Like Jesus had because honestly, we're all just re-preaching Jesus's sermons over and over again, right? This is
in some ways,
we're preaching Paul's sermons again. We're preaching Christ's message again. We're preaching God's Old Testament message again. But making it relevant and real and personal to us and to our congregations, and infusing our own personal experience into the mix and our own personal flavor, if you will, into what we have to say about it.
If we think about our history, this is not the first time that this has happened. Throughout the centuries, there have just been like books of standard sermons that you can read, or in the case of the medieval Catholic Church, where the priest didn't know how to speak Latin either, and the whole service is in Latin. This is where the word gobbledygook comes from, because it's just they're just munging random sounds that sound Latin-esque, and so then the congregation who does not speak Latin either, because they're a medieval peasant, are just hearing random sounds, and then that's religious instruction because it's got to be in Latin, right? So this is not new in a real way, but the danger of it is that we need to become more personal, not less.
Right.
We need to become more relatable, not less.
Yes.
And people are looking for more authenticity from us. That one of the great accusations that lands way too well is that we all are kind of fake. And the whole thing feels kind of fake and stuffy, or fake and overproduced, and preachers, and whether it is giant robes with moral failings or preachers in sneakers with moral failings. Like we all we really come off as inauthentic. Right, and if we're going to rebuild this thing, if we're going to make this better, if we're going to make this what it can be, more personal, more invested, more authentic. And any tool that lets inauthenticity leak in, people are going to know it.
Yes, 100% they're going to know it. And I mean, this is discipleship, right? You can't disciple someone that you don't know, right? You shouldn't necessarily preach to people about changing their life, changing their ways, changing whatever behaviors for the better, unless you do have that good relationship, that good intention, that good, that is the way that change is made. It's not just listening to the televangelist on the TV.
But even that is at least you're watching the same guy every week. He doesn't know
even
you.
that as a person, but them. Yeah.
But so a lot of these media organizations that have then turned to AI, their lead writers are breaking off and starting their own websites where they're doing the writing and they're crowdfunding and they're using things like Patreon. And so this is how you end up with things like 404 Media and Remap and Aftermath and Defector. Pick your, field of endeavor. What I just named is video games, tech, and sports. But because what they know and what these writers keep saying, and this is where, again, their understandings and their whatever intersect directly with us. It's like what builds an audience writ large is trusted voices.
Right.
Trusted voices, right? I watch the Astros, right? I am an Astros fan, right? You cannot replace Todd Callis and Jeff Blum and Julia Morales with an AI, right? Because they know the players and they are embedded with the team. And so, when Julia is doing a on-field interview, like she knows the guys. And so she's able to offer perspective. And when they talk about the team, they have this deep and abiding personal relationship. And so they know. And so when they have something to say about the Astros, or when the Houston Chronicle has something to say about the Houston Astros, I go, yeah, absolutely, because they know, right? These kind of voices really matter. Like, people don't seek content. They seek a connection. They seek a voice. And that's what we have an opportunity to have. We often let it go by just reading Stephen Furtick's stuff, and he writes great stuff, but he writes great stuff for his congregation and his style and his biceps and all of the things, right? Like, those biceps preach, I think. It's powerful. It's just powerful.
Isn't Francis Chan's? Francis Chan.
Yeah, Francis Chan's. Like, too, right? And Francis Chan, like, he didn't, when he started out in the Christian world, he did not have those biceps. I remember early Francis Chan didn't have them. And now, like, he has put in the work. And I am very proud of, I should do this. I should develop. I should not just aspire to have their wisdom or, their ability to project a positive message. I should aspire to their biceps. We should not be talking about preachers and sneakers. We should be talking about preachers with amazing biceps.
Amazing biceps. Yep.
Because both those dudes, amazing biceps.
Right.
And as mass audience pastors go, two guys I can connect with from time to time. But I can't just read his sermons because the biceps are part of what sells it and I don't have them. I need to write things for myself that don't require amazing biceps.
Well, or that requires your life experience, your lived experience, that you can bring something unique to the table. And so maybe the encouragement here is, if you are writing something and you think you're not good enough, you are. Bring your own self into it. Infuse yourself into your sermons. Infuse yourself into your writings and your teachings, because your life experience matters. Your theology matters. The way that you have encountered God matters. So just be authentic in that and bring that to others and show that to others.
I think you bring up a good point. Is one of the reasons we all feel tempted, I think, to use the AIs or the Stephen Furticks or whatever, is that imposter syndrome. Is that like, what I have, I could not possibly have anything to say that's of value. And so let me, and the truth is we all feel that way. I don't know this, but I am willing to bet that Stephen Furtick feels that way. Only narcissists don't feel that way. Right? And so if you feel that way, congratulations, you may not be a narcissist.
You're human.
You're human?
Or an AI, right? You're human.
Right.
You're not AI. Congratulations, you have feeling. Bring that feeling and all of the rest of you into your writings, and maybe be authentic into all of your leadership teachings, right?
And
Bring it to your board meeting.
This involves risk. This involves
Mhm.
emotional risk. This is one of the things they teach. They teach actors when we're coming up, right? That to be vulnerable, emotionally vulnerable, even if it's in the guise of a character, right? You're being emotionally vulnerable on stage.
Mhm.
And that is inherently risky. There is risk to it. But that risk is also what gives it the value, right? Because you are opening yourself up for positive and negative connection, right? People have an opportunity to respond.
Yes.
AI doesn't do that, right? AI does not bear your soul.
Right.
It may bear it. Maybe someday we decide it has its own soul, and that may well be. I feel unequipped to think about it, and it may well be that we decide that AI has a soul and that it can bear it, but even still, it would be bearing its own soul,
not yours,
not yours.
Yes. So be you, be authentic. I mean, I feel like we say that on the show a lot, but your authenticity matters. Being yourself matters. Being emotionally vulnerable matters. So it's what makes being a spiritual leader hard. It's what makes it so difficult some
Because
days.
it's human
is that
relationship.
You put it right. It is. We're in the business of relationship. We put it all out there, and it may not all come back positive.
So you remember that time in that Disney movie where a dude wants to get a princess, and he's a poor dude. And he's a street rat, in fact. And he gets this genie. And he'd actually already met the girl. And she kind of liked him as himself, right? Like, and if he had just said like, hi, if he had just said, hi, I'm the street rat, that you met in the market, then the movie would have been over because Jasmine would have gone, hey, that's awesome. Hi, Aladdin. This is Aladdin, by the way, if you haven't figured out where this is going. This is Aladdin.
Right.
And where like, she liked the street rat. Like Prince Ali was cool, but like if she like you kind of look like this dude. If he had just said, "Yeah, I'm Aladdin. I use this elaborate trick to get past the palace things," that movie would have been a lot shorter because what she actually liked was the authentic dude. And maybe, and so
listen to the genie when he says, "Be yourself."
Be yourself. Right? Robin Williams in the form of a bee, which you wonder, did the script, this is Robin Williams, so you cannot know, did the script say it as a bee, or did he realize that he's saying be yourself and it'd be really funny to say it like a bee, and then just went up to the microphone and went, be yourself?
I'm sure it's the latter. I'm sure it was Robin Williams going, be yourself.
That dude was just riffing. And so it is really tempting. For all of the reasons we've talked about, when you're a media executive, it's really easy to not pay writers. It's really easy to pay ChatGPT because they don't need health insurance. And as churches' budgets get strapped, it becomes difficult to carve out time financially for whether you call them a senior pastor or a teaching pastor or whatever, the writers that are on your team, right? As church budgets get strapped, then our time gets strapped, and I spend more of my life as a video editor and as the runner of a small business than my writing time. Again, I didn't finish writing until 9:40 on Thursday, and some of that was I had 8 hours of straight meetings from 9 to 5. I got back to my office at 5 p.m. mentally exhausted. I had to sleep on my couch for a while just to reset my brain so that maybe I wouldn't just stare into space like Don Draper for a number of hours and then go home having written nothing.
Right.
I get it.
Yeah.
I get it. This too is my cross to bear. I understand it. Yeah. But also, if we're gonna be who we're supposed to be, if we're gonna be a thing that people hear the voice of God in, right? What God sends out into the mission field are people, right? I mentioned Matthew 28. We're in the post-resurrection season, and so Matthew 28 is really reasonable thing to talk about. Jesus sent us, knowing who we are, knowing our imperfections, but also knowing our authentic stories.
Yes.
Jesus sends the disciples. Jesus could have just glowed in the sky or something like a Marvel villain. He could have become a sky beam. He didn't. He sent us.
God still could, right? God still could just
Right.
be the voice from heaven, could be the super shiny person in the sky. But God sent Jesus, and then God sent us.
And I think it is in part because at the root of all of this is relationship and authenticity, right? Mm-hmm. You see a sky beam, you don't know if you're for that sky beam or against that sky beam. What's that sky beam going to do? Instead, you have all these people saying, hey, here's the difference that God made in my life. Let me tell you about it. Let me stumble over my words. Let me be vulnerable.
Yes.
And that authenticity, that true story that's in your soul, that's at the root of evangelism, not social media, not even the prettiness of your words or the virality of your words.
Right.
But authentically who you are.
Right.
If you have other uses for AI, I would love to, I'm very curious about this. Because the concept, I understand the concept of using it in the research phase. I absolutely get that. Right. But even that, you got to be careful, especially in theology, right? Because it's not even theological concepts are not facts, right? So
no,
and AI hallucinates.
And bad theology is dangerous.
Yeah.
Bad theology can change the world in dangerous ways.
Yeah, so I would approach that with I would approach that with caution, but that does not fall into what I'm getting at here. That's just new research tool that's maybe good and maybe bad. But all research tools are maybe good and maybe bad, and there's plenty of the books on my shelf that have wrong information or bad. Anyways, we all have to become good consumers of information, regardless of how we get that information. I don't care.
Right.
That's not my concern. My concern is about a loss of authenticity. But if you have other uses, I know some of you who listen to the show have used AI far more than I have. I'm just going to sit in my office and stare into space. Thank you very much. I'm an old man in that way. goodnessofgodpod@gmail.com. goodnessofgodpod@gmail.com. If you want more of what we do around here, our posting schedule is really weird right now because my life is really weird right now, but it all does eventually go up. Servantsnow.org on the interwebs, facebook.com/servantsnow. Hi, Mark. youtube.com/servantsnow. As we keep we spent 2 episodes picking on these companies.
Picking on these. Yep.
It's great. It's going great. The work we do here in the Media Lab is made possible by the Innovators Grant, the Texennial Conference of the United Methodist Church. If you want to support our work right now, comment, subscribe, share, leave us 5-star reviews on Apple Podcast. All of those things come together to help more people see the work and make things like the 2.5 day studio build that we just finished really be more worthwhile. Go in peace to love and serve the Lord. We'll see you next time.